So, Dr. Sandler,
Sir.
you can cure depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And when you
Probably not a couple now. I just gave a little talk about what I'm also a counselor.
Welcome back to Psychobabble. This time we'll be talking about some cross-cultural issues. Like last time we started off, Dr. Sandler was telling about a case in which the person was having a hard time expressing anger at the father. And we talked about certain cultures where it's harder to express negative emotions towards their parents when they're talking about their family. So, Dr. Salo, what about your thoughts, more thoughts about that?
Well, my thoughts are in the neighborhood that you come from, actually, because I've treated a few patients from South Asia, from India, Pakistan, and I find that sometimes they'll have a very difficult time after describing things their parents did that they really didn't like. They can't actually criticize their parents. They feel that this is a taboo. It's not the way they were raised. It's against their religious and cultural values. And you must have had the same experience.
Yeah. And I think it goes more than that, that they cannot express. Sometimes they cannot even admit that they are having those feelings.
Which makes therapy very challenging if that's where the problem comes from.
Right. Yeah. So so you find that interferes with the treatment process, that people will hold it too much back and.
Oh yeah, people will just put a brake on and say, I can't possibly criticize my father even though he did X, Y, and Z. He's my father and I have to respect him. What I tend to do is do a little explaining. All the world's great religions came about long before modern psychology took a look inside our heads and started dissecting these things called emotions. And so I think a lot of people have this idea that if I think something bad, it could happen, or it's just as bad as having it happen. In fact, American Catholic patients have said to me, the evil thought is as bad as the evil deed. And so I try to say, with all due respect to their religion, modern psychology says that a negative thought or an angry thought is not the same as an angry deed. That we can have the feeling, we can even have a fantasy of getting revenge. That doesn't mean that you're going to go out and do something bad. And often that helps. Often that helps. One Catholic patient actually wasn't totally convinced and went to her priest and said, this crazy therapy guy is trying to get me to express anger at my father and I feel bad about it. And the priest, thank goodness, said, I give you my permission and my blessing, go back and do your therapy. And she did. But she needed the priest's okay.
Yeah. And I remember one person I was treating who had similar problems, and a young girl who was dating someone, and her parents, the father especially, had a very bad reaction, and had some unfortunate things happen at the same time that she was doing that, and he blamed it on her, that look what you did to me.
Oh, wow.
So talking to her, and she was also having a lot of difficulties, even despite such a huge thing that happened to her. So it took me a little while to make it clear to her that even if you have just the fact that you have angry feelings towards your one or both of your parents doesn't mean that you don't respect them. You can have angry feelings towards people you disrespect.
It's another aspect of modern psychology, of course, that tells us that we can have mixed feelings towards the same person. It's not either you love the person or you hate the person. A patient of mine recently came in and said, this is so hard to say, but I hate them. I hate what my family has done. And I said, it's okay to say that. I know you also love them, and it's okay to have mixed feelings. But that was news to her.
Yes.
And it made it possible for her to say that.
Yes. And that is I think a bigger issue more than in any culture. I think it's a lot of like Western culture too have this the difficulty with having mixed feelings.
Yeah.
They like to put it in boxes that I either love him or I don't love him, and it
Right.
becomes a problem when they are having negative feelings towards their spouses often.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In a marriage, we have to acknowledge this, to have a healthy marriage, to be able to say you can be intensely angry at a person, you can not like some of their traits, but still love that person, admire some of their traits. I read a great article years ago by a couple of social workers that said that the problem in marriage, this is a little off track, but the problem in marriage in America is that people grow up on all these romantic movies. So you find Mr. Right or Miss Right, and you fall in love, and then it's happily ever after. The movie always stops right about at the altar. And a healthy marriage is all kinds of ups and downs and mixed feelings. So you go through a spell of, God, this is the most wonderful person in the world. I'm so glad I found her. To, oh my God, I can't stand the way she butters her toast. I'm going to go crazy. But that's normal.
Yeah, that's normal.
And people go in with these silly movie expectations, and then they're in divorce court because this isn't right. It's not like the movies.
Yeah. So lived happily ever after should be replaced by they started happily and then they were in for a roller coaster ride.
That would not make a good movie, but that is more accurate. Right.
But you started about the South Asian culture, and one of the things that came to my mind was that, especially the 2 or 3 people that I have recently dealt with, is that the problem is not only expressing the feeling, even if they come to that. There is a kind of a bereavement too, because of the anger, in the present, from the parents. Sometimes they get almost like outcast in the room. It's like a breakup in the relationship.
Oh yeah.
So they have to grieve that too.
Yeah, in the most difficult cases that happens.
Yeah. So if often it is the scenario when there is a girl, Indian girl or Pakistani girl, who picks up a guy and dates or gets married. Then sometimes parents stop talking to them.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Ostracize them.
Very painful.
That's very painful.
Right.
So because they too feel that disrespectful. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You made an interesting comment when we were talking before we started the tape, that in some ways we do what the priest does, right? Can you?
In what way?
The confessional. Right?
Oh yes, yeah. So talking about negative feelings, like it's hard in other religions and other cultures too, like in some Catholic families, it's very hard to have the negative feelings. But they have made this structure within their culture, which is called a confession, in which they can go and say all the negatives to the priest and hope that the priest reassures them or does something. So cultures do have some place where you can go and vent it out and be negative. And
in fact, Freud had a contemporary named Benedict, who wrote about the pathogenic secret. The patient coming to do this talk therapy with Benedict, whatever he was doing, often had a pathogenic secret. Maybe I hate my father, or I want to leave my family and go and date this guy of a different religion, whatever it was. And telling that to the therapist was relieving, as it is to tell it to the priest. In some way, there's an overlap in functions.
Yeah. And that's sometimes I have seen, in people in Indian families that there is an uncle or an aunt or a grandparent who is more lenient and open and westernized, so-called, in their approach, to whom kids go to, and then they vent it out, and they come and intervene and try to sort things out, and that's how usually things get resolved. So they have this structure of resolving each other's problems too.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So we face a lot of these issues, and if you have any thoughts, comments, stories, please share them with us. Right?
Absolutely.
And we'll stop here today, and look forward to your thoughts and comments.
I just gave